President Joe Biden has finally released a few official statements about the conflict in Israel. And while some have been calling on him to condemn the actions of the Israeli government in raiding the mosque,
Al-Aqsa Mosque.
The Al-Aqsa Mosque, I apologize. And while some are asking him to condemn the actions by the Israeli government in the Al-Aqsa Mosque and in their efforts to evict Palestinians from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah, he has actually released a statement that leaves much to be desired. He didn't cite any of that and instead made it abundantly clear that he is backing the Israeli government regardless of their brutality. I want to give you his statements. So as the Associated Press reported, President Joe Biden called Netanyahu to support Israel's right to defend itself, and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that he was sending a senior diplomat to the region to try to calm tensions. President Biden spoke today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and this is the official White House statement. He condemned the rocket attacks by Hamas and other terrorist groups, including against Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. He conveyed his unwavering support for Israel's security and for Israel's legitimate right to defend itself and its people while protecting civilians. That's the relevant part of his statement. And again, in no part of that official statement did he mention the aggression that was committed by Israel, starting a month ago, by the way, by severely limiting the ability of Palestinians to practice their religion within Jerusalem. And then it turned into the nonsense about evicting them from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah. And then we saw the raids in the mosque. And so none of that was mentioned whatsoever. It's all about Israel having the right to defend itself, but not Palestinians having the right to defend themselves.
Okay, so we're gonna get to some Democratic reaction in a second, but let me give you my reaction. Joe Biden's always been racist against Palestinians. He's always thought they should be occupied. He's never, ever said anything but that. He's always thought that killing them was no big deal. He didn't even mention it. There's, what, 6 Israelis dead, and my heart breaks for that. One of them was a 6-year-old kid. I think maybe now up to 7 Israelis dead. Those are innocent civilians. There's over 80 Palestinians dead. I note the tragedy of both. Biden notes the tragedy of what happened to Israel and doesn't even mention the Palestinians, erases them. Doesn't mention the ethnic cleansing that's happening in East Jerusalem. Doesn't mention the attack on a holy site. Imagine if it was reversed. Imagine if there was an Arab country that kept millions of Jews in an open air prison and said, these Jews are too violent for us to ever free them. We're not gonna free them, okay? And you're not to mention them, okay? And we will kill them over and over again. And we will set up barricades where we check for Jews. And we check to see if these Jews are dangerous or not. And we don't want them protecting our homeland. And imagine the US president comes out and says, oh, well, the Arab country is obviously right. By the way, it's not that hard to imagine. Is Biden and Trump probably would have done the same for Saudi Arabia. They have done the same in Yemen, right? So it's not about Israelis or Palestinians, it's not about Jews or Muslims. It's about power, the people who have it and the people who don't have it. So if you're in Yemen and you're Muslim and you're not powerful and you're part of the Shia Muslims, we'll let the Saudis crush you year after year after year. If Israel is powerful and the Palestinians are not powerful, they're not human to Joe Biden. He doesn't care about them at all. Look, that's a fact. All those dead Palestinians, Netanyahu clearly started the war by attacking the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And Biden doesn't mention the Palestinians at all. That's literally saying, I don't give a damn about them. And he doesn't say that. They asked him, reporters asked his administration, we showed it to you a couple of days ago. You say the Israelis have a right to defend themselves and that's a universal principle. It's a good point, interesting point. That makes sense. Do the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? The Biden administration still has not answered that. Because you know what their answer is. Their answer is no, they don't have the same human rights as Israelis if you believe the Biden administration. It is a deeply racist policy. And I don't care who in Washington cries over it. Oh, you can't call the president that, he's a Democrat. I don't care what you think. I'm in the job of delivering facts. If you say the Palestinians should be occupied forever, and I don't care how many of them die in Israeli bombings, and I'm not even gonna note it because they don't have the same humanity, the same human rights, the same need for freedom, the same need for their lives, and I don't value their lives, Well, that is a deeply racist position, and that is Joe Biden's position.
And keep in mind, I mean, Hamas has called for a ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected that offer for a ceasefire. And who started the aggression to begin with? It started with Benjamin Netanyahu immediately trying to evict Palestinians from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah. Why did he do that? Obviously, he's having issues with his own political career as a result of failing to form a government, a new government. He's also facing criminal corruption charges. I'm sure he'd like to, draw attention away from those issues and try to garner support by fueling the conflict and the violence that's taking place right now. One other thing I wanted to bring up quickly, because oftentimes when we talk about what motivates the US government to unequivocally support the actions of the Israeli government regardless of what they do, we'll bring up lobbies and the way that political campaigns are funded in the United States. And I think that that's an important point to bring up. But there's a second part of it that I think is relevant to this as well, because many have, in my opinion, rightly brought up the fact that the United States provides $3.8 billion a year in foreign aid to Israel. And so our taxpayer money is helping to support what we're seeing right now in all of those awful videos. But it's also, when you really think about it, a transfer of wealth, because that money goes to the Israeli government, and what does the Israeli government do with it? They buy our weapons. So it's a transfer of wealth. Our taxes go to the Israeli government and then get transferred over to weapons manufacturers and private military contractors. Yeah. That's how it works.
So then we, of course, give Iron Dome to Israel, which I've said on many occasions is great because it prevents civilians from dying. It knocks down the Hamas rockets. And there's been about 1,800 rockets fired from Hamas. Some have landed, but barely any, thank God, because of Iron Dome, that the US developed, paid for, and gave to Israel, okay? Now, when I ask, can we give Iron Dome to the Palestinians, everybody in Washington laughs uproariously. Of course not. They're by definition terrorists. Why are they all terrorists? Are all the millions of people in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, they're all terrorists? The 89 people who died, about at least 7 of them were militants. That means over 80 of them were not militants. You want to put a higher number? Israeli military often lies about this, and they claim that 30 of them were militants. Okay, take the Israeli military number. Well, then that means 59 of them were not militants. And by the way, is the IDF great and the greatest and most efficient fighting force in the world, as I'm often told, and we all have to pray and bow down to how great IDF is at military and executing people? Or are they incompetent? Which one is it? So if they're great, then they're killing those civilians on purpose. Or they're incompetent. Which one? I'm not, you tell me, right? And so now to the ceasefire. Well, so Netanyahu has done this trick a couple times. He'll put out outrageous terms for a peace offer. Okay, we get everything, you get almost nothing. Give me all your goddamn land, okay? I'll give you a little sliver of it, but mainly I'm gonna take giant chunks for the settlers, right? And the Palestinians obviously say no. And they go, you rejected our offer, that's it. It's your fault forever. I'm gonna keep you imprisoned for 10 more years, 20 more years, 30 more years. You can never have your freedom, Palestinians, because you did not negotiate properly. Then this time around, Hamas says, can you stop killing us? And by us, they don't mean just Hamas, they mean the 2 million civilians in Gaza. And Netanyahu, without blinking an eye, says, no ceasefire. I continue to kill you. Benny Gantz, the defense minister, says Gaza will burn. So who rejected the ceasefire now? Who rejected peace agreements? The Israelis. There's no, that's a fact, that's a fact. But later they will do propaganda and say, no, it's the Arabs, they're so unreasonable. The Palestinians, the savages. You can't deal with them, you can't give them freedom. You have to keep enslaving them. You have to keep putting them in open air prisons and not letting them control their government, not control themselves, because they can't handle it, they're Muslims. I'm sick of the bigotry, I'm sick of it. And when the American media and the American government does it implicitly, it doesn't make it any better. All right, look, I'm gonna give you one quote from our members. Ink Dragon says about this whole thing, especially Gantz's line about burning Gaza. That's disgusting. This is like when an abusive partner says, you're making me hurt you, except it's, quote, you're making us murder your children. Who the hell could defend this? And unfortunately, the answer to that is the entire United States government. The United States government says, here, have more billions of dollars to do more of that. And it's It's exactly right. And every time you ask Israel, can you let them go? Can you please get off their neck and let them breathe? They say, no, they had it coming. Because they once threw a stone, they fired missiles. They did. Did you? Yeah, I fired much bigger missiles. I killed way more people. But state violence does not count. When the defense minister says we're gonna burn you, that is terrorizing the civilians, and it's doing it on purpose. They now lined up troops now along the border. They might do a ground invasion like they did before. Why? To terrorize you. How dare the prisoners rise up? The prisoners have no rights. They have no human rights. They have no natural rights. They are to remain prisoners for decades on end. And the American government, in its infinite arrogance and corruption, backs that. No. And I'm done calling Israel a wonderful, beloved ally. I love the people of Israel, and I want them to be safe. I want them to be secure. I want them to have great, defendable borders. I want all of that for them because they're human beings. They're wonderful human beings. Just like everybody else, we're all human. But if you tell me Israel doesn't do anything America wants, they constantly bomb an imprisoned neighbor, and they antagonize half the world doing that, and somehow they're our beloved ally? How? Why? Because some politicians got money from AIPAC? If you want to cry about that absolute stone cold fact, go ahead and cry about it. But it's a fact. Do a fact check on it. Do our politicians get money from AIPAC and other groups like that and other lobbyists? Absolutely. Does it affect their vote? Of course it does. Like when the NRA gives money, when the drug companies give money, the banks give money, the oil companies give money. Does it impact their votes? Of course it does. Of course it does. And the reason I tell you that is it's not about the Israelis. That's about our government, the American government. They just say, hey, it's open season on corruption. So as long as whichever lobby, the Saudi lobby, Turkish lobby, Israeli, Norwegian, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Drugs, payday lenders, it doesn't matter. Give me the money and I'll let you do anything you want and call you a beloved ally. No, it's not right when the Saudis do it. It's not right when the Turks go into northern Syria, and it ain't right when Israel imprisons those people for over 54 years. And you know it. You know it in your bones it isn't right. And to say that the prisoners had it coming, they're not regular people, we should imprison them because they're too violent, as you draw bombs on their kids. No, it's sickening, it's gross. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, we really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.